for people who've seen any of the videos that I've made today, which is a slew of them, because I keep responding, I've just been sitting here, boom, going back and forth since ever since I was able to turn my computer back on early this morning. Because I had no right to go to Vespers or anything, or not Vespers, God, I'm talking liturgy. I've been making things about history or criticizing history, and many times I forget to, I assume people are kind of on the same page with me. So I actually made a video called like the historical method in judging ancient accounts. I should have put judging the validity of ancient accounts. I don't think I put that. Probably should change the title or something. Not too important. But if you're seeing this, go back and check that out. Or if you've seen any of those videos, this is a good one to see. Although if you haven't seen those videos, it might not be all that relevant. Somebody asked me, because I was talking about the responding to this idea that Bill Maher said, well, when Christianity gained power, it was called the Dark Ages, as if Christianity was responsible for the Dark Ages in any way, shape, or form. When in fact I show, and I would challenge anybody who disagrees with me to prove me wrong, that it was actually pagans that caused the Dark Ages. Now, I think people, again, they infer and assume, and they find implications where there's not, where I'm not implying anything. Rome wasn't expanding in the West. It was just kind of keeping the status quo. I mean, they already had built Hadrian's Wall. All the places in the Mediterranean. I mean, the Mediterranean was called the Roman Lake. They didn't. What the hell is the point of conquering land where there's no towns, where there's no roads, where even to farm it, you have to chop down all the trees, where it freezes, where the winters are too long and the summers are too short? Why would you even want that land? And the only people there are these people who were just who are basically prehistoric, who are almost just out of the Stone Age, who got bronze very late, who got iron very late, who got steel only from the Roman army, and they kind of can, maybe they know how to work it, but they didn't come up with any new techniques or anything. They were just people who were, these people who were nomads, and some of the people were people who were inhabiting that land, but then got pushed out by these nomads coming from the north and the west. When I say the pagans caused the fall of the Roman Empire, I'm not implicating all pagans. I mentioned the Hindus. In the comments I say the Hindus didn't. They were in their. They were very polytheistic. They were in their second technological decline when the Germanic tribes of the north were just getting out of the Stone Age. We're just finding things like, we're just coming in contact with people who actually could make bronze, or were iron, even smith iron or steel or anything like that, and to say that people were in the Stone Age doesn't mean they're any less technologically advanced. That they were just stupid or like a caveman, because the Aztecs were Stone Age people. I mean, the only thing they could melt was gold, which anybody can melt gold. All you have to do is blow through a tube on a flame. It wasn't like smelting bronze or crafting steel. But they built these amazing pyramids with all these astrological alignments and everything. And people had to be very smart and know mathematics to actually do that, and actually came up with zero. They didn't come up with the modern version of zero, but they discovered zero before it was fleshed out during the Islamic Caliphate. somebody said, well, just because somebody has steel wheels doesn't mean they have the right to take land from people with iron or people with wooden wheels. And I said, I agree. Had I had to choose between fighting with Vercingetorix, who was a Celtic king in Gaul. Gaul is now modern-day France. Against Gaius Julius Caesar, even though the Roman army crushed Vercingetorix and the Celts and conquered Gaul, I would have fought on the side of Vercingetorix. I don't think that was good. But when you have an empire that has existed for 300 years, and even when the Romans conquered people, they built baths, roads, and if you served in the army, you could become a citizen. And even living in provincial lands for a period of time, if you're already there and you own property, your kids could be citizens. It actually made life better for people. And I mean, that doesn't justify going and conquering things. Maybe some people think it might in the name of progress to conquer and build civilization, to advance this stuff, because it eventually increased living standards of these people very greatly. But if you're going to say who caused the Dark Ages, it was the barbarian hordes. And I mentioned in the video, some of them were heretics, Aryans. The Aryans invaded, which were a barbarian tribe, but they were a form of heretical Christianity that the Vandals were actually racing across North Africa to kill Augustine. I guess God has a sense of humor, because Augustine died just before the Vandals got there, because they saw him as the worst heretic on earth. They hated Augustine. They wanted to kill him. But the people who were really vicious, because even the Visigoths, modern historians say, well, maybe the Visigoths weren't just these evil people. Maybe that's propaganda of Rome. But if you look at who destroyed aqueducts, who killed whole populations, and then when it was these Nordic people from the north who were very pagan, the Saxons, the Angles, the Jutes, and yes, I know the Britons, after the Roman army left, they invited a small faction of Anglo-Saxon warriors to stay in Kent. But then they sent word back home, and it was a huge invasion that caused a genocide and pushed back the Britons into Wales, where you get the myth of King Arthur, who might have actually had some basis in fact. But if you're going to say who caused the Dark Ages, it was the pagan barbarian horde from the north. The Lombards, the Franks, the Anglo-Saxons, and then who held it down. I mean, even when Charles Martel was fighting off, when he pushed the Muslims back over the Pyrenees, when he secured France for the Franks, it was about the same time that when the Anglo-Saxons were kind of becoming Christianized and getting on their feet, and they had monasteries, and they started, the Anglo-Saxon monks were actually copying not only the Bible, but actually texts from ancient Rome and Greece. We see the sack at Lindisfarne of the first Viking strike, and we see that people can't even farm, that they have to abandon places because the Vikings come through, and they don't want to conquer. They want to rape, kill, steal, and burn cities down. So they were very detrimental. Now, they wouldn't set foot on the European continent until, or at least not in any of the Frankish kingdoms until Charlemagne was good and dead, until he was dead for years, because he would have kicked the crap out of him. Charlemagne was kind of badass. But it was this destruction, this mass destruction of civilization, to put people in basically a dark age, the long dark, which basically lasts from about 550 to 750, when you see this rising up. And you see certain kings during this time, after they had destroyed the infrastructure, the fields went fallow, the writing system was obliterated, and it was only from the little outposts of Catholicism that kept writing alive and kept Plato being copied, and were teaching not only Christianity, but but Roman law and Greek thought, that you see the rise of. Hey, Betty, get out of here. Betty, dog, hold on. That we see a reemergence of a civilization, but nowhere near as advanced as Rome that had just fallen. People looked around and saw these broken aqueducts and these buildings that they couldn't replicate because they didn't have the mathematics to do it. And they were like, what happened? Are we descended from them, or did we invade? Who are we? This is the crisis that I talk about of the English for a while. Actually fancied themselves as descendants of Rome, as the Romans that were in Britain. When it wasn't until the Romans had left Britain that the Anglo-Saxons came in, and it was actually England. And then you had the Normans come in 1066. But you see Clovis, he converts to Christianity, basically in the heat of a battle. His wife was a Christian. In the heat of a battle, since he was losing the battle, he cried out to his wife's God, and he won. So he said, well, okay, that's the God that works for me. I'm going to be a Christian. And they had a very different view of what Christianity was, but it was these outposts of Roman Catholicism, of the Roman Catholic Church. Mind you, I'm not a Roman Catholic, and I speak often against Augustine and Neoplatonism and stuff like this. But this is what helped mend society back together. You had Clovis was the first convert. It wasn't officially, Britain wasn't even officially Catholic until Augustine of Rome in the year 800. Charlemagne became the Holy Roman Emperor, even though you had a whole Roman Empire that was Christian from Constantine. And the areas that stayed Christian, there was no Dark Ages. The areas that actually could stay Christian actually preserved Greek, the fullness of Rome, which was the Byzantine Empire. They had running water, paved roads, architecture, all this stuff. They built in stone instead of wood. They had massive trade. For Anglo-Saxon Britain, or Frankish Gaul, which now France, there was nothing like this. You were wearing animal skins. You weren't. I mean, it was the rich people that actually had cloth, or what your little clan could weave, or your sister or mom or wife could weave from whatever fibers they could gather from wool and stuff like this. They weren't wearing silk and fine, embroidery with all this, They didn't have any type of medicine. The Byzantines actually had the equivalent to Roman medicine, where they could cure people and do certain types of surgery, and they knew about antiseptics and everything, except, instead of using superstition and basically voodoo, and not that it's voodoo, but just basically superstition and magic to try to cure themselves. The Romans could purify water. They were building in brick and mortar when these people had came in, and they never knew how to build in brick and mortar. What reintroduced this was the Roman Catholic Church. But even when it became Catholicism, people said, okay, now we're going to actually have law, and you can't just go out and slaughter somebody. We're going to actually settle down, and this is the land, and work, love your family, and well, if you've got a brave son, maybe you can join the army and fight with us. But then you had a group called the Vikings come through, struck Lindisfarne, and after Charlemagne died, they wreaked havoc, and it caused horrible repercussions. And it wasn't until they actually became Christian that you see in Western Europe, you see civilization and Christianity. Which came first? In many cases, it was Christianity that came first. Now, I know people who are atheists or skeptics or agnostics, or maybe they just don't like Christianity, don't want to hear this. That's actually the fact. But I'm speaking of after Rome had been established for well over 3 centuries. And Britain had been very Roman. The Britons actually viewed themselves as Roman. They were probably quasi-Italic, quasi-Celtic. But they were horrified at these people thought the Brighton, the one Brighton, I don't know, warlord or magistrate or whatever, that invited the Anglo-Saxons to come over. They thought he was insane. They sat down, they had like, eating instruments and bowls and all this stuff, and the damn Anglo-Saxons were drinking out of skulls, and they had food all over their face, and they were growling, and they smelled, and they didn't bathe, and they didn't shave. The Britons were very Romanized, and were generally peaceful people. But before the Roman Empire, there were Celts that were pretty much kind of peaceful. If you look at the Visigoths, the people who actually came into Rome in 410, the Romans were treating them so horribly. The Romans were actually, it got so bad because they were using them as an auxiliary troop to fight the Huns, and the Huns were vicious, psychotic, again, pagan, anti-Christian warlords who were, it wasn't just they were pagans and they were attacking it, to think they actually, like the Vikings and like the Lombards, seemed to revile Christianity because it raised up the weak. This is, you worship a guy who not only that was he crucified and then he died, he actually willingly went to his death. He wasn't a man. He didn't fight in battle. You're worshiping this dead, weak guy who spoke against lifting a sword or even defending yourself when you got slapped across the cheek. They thought this was disgusting. They said these people want to be. They'd go and rape the women. It was the power of the sword. Might makes right in their view, and there was really no right. It was just what we could take over. It was. So when the Visigoths were basically pounding at the gates of Rome, not the gates of Rome, the borders, to come in. Hey, let us in, let us in, let us in. They were kind of let in, but they were in these kind of crushed up camps. They said, we don't want the Visigoths in here. What are these people going to do? And the people were in such dire starvation, they actually had to sell their children into slavery to the Romans for dog meat. And the Romans were officially Catholic Christian at that time. Now, yeah, obviously, Rome had just recently became officially Christian, and many people came to it as just it's kind of like it was like the in thing. It was like, oh, it's in fashion now. Kind of like after the Soviet Union stopped being communist and went back to Russia and all these other places, it was kind of fashionable for people to come out of the closet of being Christian, and other people started going to church because it was, oh, this is the culture that got lost for a while and stuff like that, But the Roman soldiers didn't really have Christian hearts or compassion to these people, and many of the Visigoths were actually Arian Christians. The difference between the Arians and the Catholics at that point was the Arians didn't view Christ as part of God, as homoousios. They saw him as homoousios, like God, like God. He's from heaven and he's divine, but he's not the same as the Father. And they were Arians, like the Vandals. Well, the Visigoths also had pagans. There were many pagans. But if you're going to say, well, who caused the Dark Ages? What caused the Dark Ages? Was it conversion to Christianity? Because we see a whole other half of the Roman Empire that had converted to Christianity that still was preserving the works of Aristotle, Plato, even pagan Romans. The reason why we have Julius Caesar and Seneca and all the Epicurean writers of Rome and the Stoic writers of Greece were all preserved by Christians. And Aristotle, people say, oh, the Muslims have preserved Aristotle. The Byzantine Empire encompassed Syria, Jordan, Palestine, Anatolia, which is Turkey, Greece, Libya, Tunisia. So the Arabs conquered those areas and then reproduced it. It was the fact that they took over Christian land where they had this stuff. And the West had fallen to the Dark Ages, to fall into pagan barbarian hordes. But still, even when you had the Islamic conquest, you had Anatolia going into the Balkans, and it was Rome. It was a Christian version of Rome, and they were the most advanced civilization at the time. Until there was a period when the Muslim Caliphate actually started putting all this knowledge together and made advances in mathematics and architecture, but they worked from the foundations of the Byzantines, which worked from the foundations of the Romans and the Greeks, which were heavily influenced by the Egyptians and the alphabet that comes out of the Levant and Phoenicia. And even then, the agriculture comes to those areas from the Tigris and Euphrates. But the barbarians, all these thousands of years that happened, the Nordic barbarian warrior people who believed in dying in battle, killing your enemy. If somebody's outside your tribe, it's fine if you kill them or rape them. Might makes right. These were not people who were preserving the Roman way of life or the Persian way of life or any of these other things. They went and destroyed. It wasn't until people actually became Christianized that they actually set up law and order and decided to start learning how to read and write and pave roads and build towns and stuff like that. So Bill Maher's thing is ridiculous, but I'm only speaking of it from the fall of Rome. I'm not saying, oh, well, it was right for the Romans to go and conquer the Celts or expel the Celts from the Iberian Peninsula and Latinize what's now Spain and Portugal. Or I'm not saying it was right for even the in name Catholic, because how many Christians were even in the Roman army at that point? It was still pretty much against Christianity to join the army. It wasn't until Augustine started talking. There was some people before him, but it really wasn't until Augustine that the idea of holy war for a Christian actually was, okay, you can fight in defense. And that was mainly prompted by the fact that the barbarians were coming through and killing every man, woman, and child. That they said, oh, wait, you know what? You can't just say, oh, I need to save my own soul, so I'll have to let all these people die and be tortured and be enslaved and raped. It was, wait, Christ died for you, so you should sacrifice yourself for the widow and the orphan. And then they started looking back to the Old Testament saying, oh, wait, this stuff's useful. We can actually fight our enemy and kill our enemy if they're going to just kill us. And that's when they viewed, okay, it's only turn the other cheek when you're spreading the gospel. If a maniac's coming at you with a sword and is going to kill your family, you kill them. That was the view that he expressed. But yeah, it wasn't right for the Roman soldiers to abuse the Visigoths like that. It wasn't right for the Romans just to mow over people they saw as inferior. The Celts actually were not like what gets called barbarian of the Nordic Germans, or even the people from the West, like the people descended from the Scythians, like the Huns, the Lombards, the Anglo-Saxons, the Vikings. The Celts were different. Actually, the Celts had a community that spanned from Ireland all the way to Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey. Funny thing, the first people that Paul wrote to, the earliest letter of Paul's we have is to Galatia. The Galatians were a Celtic colony in Anatolia. These were people who had trade. So it's not, oh, well, pagans bad, Christian good. And no, it's Bill Maher said that that Dark Ages is caused by Christianity, and there's every single piece of evidence points to it being barbarian, pagan nomads who crushed Rome and plunged Western Europe into 200 years of a long darkness. These two megads of Serbia and Syria. Boom, and they find implications where there's not, where I'm not implying anything. Rome wasn't expanding in the West. It was just kind of keeping the status quo. I mean, they already had built Hadrian's Wall. All the places in the Mediterranean. I mean, the Mediterranean was called the Roman Lake. They didn't. What the hell is the point of conquering land where there's no towns, where there's no roads, where even to farm it you have to chop down all the trees, where it freezes, where the winters are too long and the summers are too short? Why would you even want that land? And the only people there are these people who were just out of they were in their they were very polytheistic. They were in their second technological decline when the Germanic tribes of the north were just getting out of the Stone Age. We're just finding things like, we're just coming in contact with people who actually could make bronze, or were iron, even smith iron or steel or anything like that, you know. And to say that people were in the Stone Age doesn't mean they're any less technologically advanced. I mean, well, that they were just stupid or like a caveman, because the Aztecs were Stone Age people. I mean, the only thing they could melt was gold, which anybody can melt gold. All you have to do is blow through a tube on a flame. Who were basically prehistoric, who were almost just out of the Stone Age, who got bronze very late, who got iron very late, who got steel only from the Roman army, and they kind of can, maybe they know how to work it, but they didn't come up with any new techniques or anything. They were just people who were I mean, these people who were nomads, and some of the people were people who were inhabiting that land, but then got pushed out by these nomads coming from the north and the west. When I say the pagans caused the fall of the Roman Empire, I'm not implicating all pagans. I mentioned the Hindus. You know, in the comments, I say the Hindus didn't. They were something. Not too important, but if you're seeing this, go back and check that out, or if you've seen any of those videos, this is a good one to see. Although if you haven't seen those videos, it might not be all that relevant. Somebody asked me, because I was talking about the responding to this idea that Bill Maher said, well, when Christianity gained power, it was called the Dark Ages, as if Christianity was responsible for the Dark Ages in any way, shape, or form. When in fact I show, and I would challenge anybody who disagrees with me to prove me wrong, that it was actually pagans that caused the Dark Ages. Now, I think people, again, they infer and assume. For people who've seen any of the videos that I've made today, which is a slew of them, because I keep responding, I've just been sitting here, boom, going back and forth since, ever since I was able to turn my computer back on early this morning. Because I had no right to go to Vespers or anything, or not Vespers, God, I'm talking liturgy. I've been making things about history or criticizing history, and many times I forget to, I assume people are kind of on the same page with me. So I actually made a video called the historical method in judging ancient accounts. I should have put judging the validity of ancient accounts. I don't think I put that. Probably should change the title.